I'm just gonna, oh, all right.
Okay, so the presenter for tonight is Michele White. Michelle's a kind of a longtime friend of the chapter. She's done a bunch of presentations for us, and just a lot of us know her and know her shop down in Lake George, Tumbling Trout Fly Shop. If you haven't had a chance to stop down there, please do. It's a great little shop, and her knowledge of the area in South Park and some of the stuff that you wouldn't normally kind of hear about and some of the details she's got are pretty spectacular. So I really encourage you guys to stop by there and check her out and check out the folks that they've got there. They got some really good guides there as well. She's a retired geologist, but she's been guiding and kind of rowing for the last 20 plus years. As I said, her wealth of information on South Park is amazing. She's actually got a little book down there that I picked up myself that she can talk about maybe at some stage tonight, but it's just got tremendous detail on it and some of the stuff that you don't really hear about. So really good information on South Park down there. She's been a longtime member of the Pikes Peak chapter of TU and been highly involved with them. So we respect that and appreciate that as well. It's a great chapter. And her presentation tonight is going to be on kind of looking at Brookie venues down in South Park. So kind of a different twist on South Park than we normally get, where you're normally going down to 11 Mile Canyon or you're hitting the Dream Stream or what have you down there. This is going to be a little bit different for you, just to kind of hit some different venues down there and just really not get the crowds you might get at some of those other big locations. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michele, and welcome aboard, Michele, and thanks for doing this as always.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me all right?
You're great.
Okay, I very much appreciate your inviting me to give this talk tonight. Are you able to see my laptop?
Not yet.
All right, let me see if I can do a share here. Now can you see something?
Here it comes.
Right on.
And there it is.
This is my third book about fly fishing in this area. Subaru-able Brookie venues. The start of this was when COVID first broke out, and we didn't know what to expect from COVID. There was a lot of stress. People were not themselves, and it was really hot, and we had a lot of wildfires. So do you remember the smoke on the Front Range? Smoke from California and Canada. There was really big wildfires. The smoke was really dense, like fog everywhere, and it was really hot. So I found that I found solace for myself by going to higher elevations because there weren't any people there, and the air was cool and clear. And I discovered brookie fishing in these little creeks. And I made it my goal over the next couple of years to fish every creek that could host fish in South Park, which is predominantly the Mosquito range. Let's see. So I just wanted to encourage people that this is what I was doing. I would go home after my shop. I would closing my shop at noon, and I would go home and pick up my dogs and just head to the high country, and just not really organized, and just head out without really a clue. And this is what I found. These are glacial basins. Every single dirt road led up, up, up into glacial basins, and they were filled with wildflowers and creeks. All of them were fishable. And this is what I discovered. The brookies, different type of fishing for me. So I became really interested in the South Platte. First off, I grew up in Aurora, and I knew the South Platte flowing through Denver, downtown Denver. And later when I was hunting, I knew about the Platte River out in Nebraska. And my husband showed to me that the South Platte and the North Platte flowed together just downstream of Cabela's out there. But I didn't know really the South Platte in how important it is in Park County until I moved here 20 years ago from Victor, Colorado. And the same South Platte that flows through 11 Mile Canyon flows through Wildcat Canyon, Cheeseman Reservoir, Waterton Canyon, Chatfield Reservoir. Those are places that I grew up knowing about. And I did not know that the headwaters of the South Platte originate in South Park. The mountains are the origin for the major tributaries that flow into the South Platte River. And this is where I live. And I became really fascinated with learning about all of the springs and all of the homesteads that hosted private water and where I could go for public access to fish these waters. These purple areas in this slide are all the areas that I cover in my book. And the circles are just showing you the major tributaries that are flowing into the South Platte River. At the top, there are some northern tributaries, Lost Creek, the northern tributary of Tarryall River, a middle fork is a tributary, and the South Fork tributary. And all of these tributaries have creeks that flow into them that are either fed by runoff or springs up in high country. When I was fishing predominantly for brook trout, and I was covering anywhere from South Park's basin starts at about 9,000 feet. And when you get to Fairplay, you're already going up to 10,000 feet. And I was fishing up to 12,600 feet. And I wasn't always catching brookies. I found there was a slot for brook trout where if I caught them, they were brook trout between about 10 and 12,000 feet. If I got above 12,000 feet, I was starting to get cutthroats and no brookies. And if I fished below 10,000 feet, I would get juvenile brown trout and not brookies. So I learned that the cutthroat and the brown trout compete with the brook trout and eat the brook trout, and that there's really a brookie niche right in the middle between 10 and 12,000 feet. I'd like to point out something about and hereditary, and the reason that we even have brookies in Colorado. So the salmon were ocean-going fish in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean joins and touches the Arctic Ocean. So the great ancestors of salmon in the Atlantic Ocean produced Arctic char in the north and brown trout, well, salmon that became brown trout. The salmon come up into the land, as you know, and they spawn and then they go back to the ocean. But they eventually, some families of salmon stayed landlocked and they didn't return to the ocean. These became trout. So if it came from the Atlantic Ocean, we had brown trout. And if it came from the Arctic Ocean, we had char. And if it came from the Pacific Ocean, we had rainbows. Point being, the closer related brown trout and char can breed and produce like horse donkeys and infertile offspring. They would produce a tiger trout, but rainbows cannot reproduce with a brookie or a brown trout. But rainbows have cutthroats, and rainbows can breed within their own genus and with different species. And the point being that when we started moving out around, started moving brookies around, we introduced brown trout, and particularly when we started moving rainbows and cutthroats around, we were polluting the genetic pool of pure cutthroats, particularly indigenous cutthroats in Colorado, and making cut bows that were not infertile. It's only by DNA can we really tell if we have populations of trout that are or have been, I'll call it stepped on. So picking up fish, piggly here and there, I was using books first to tell the difference between if I really have a brook trout or a juvenile brown. And there were a couple of things I learned, and including rainbow trout. It depends, the time of year, trout will have different coloring. Depending on what they eat, they'll have different coloring. Depending on how old they are, they'll have a different coloring. So a lot of the keys for identifying a brook trout were not holding true. The only things that really held true is if there's dark skin with lighter spots, it's a brook trout. If it's lighter skin with spots, it's a juvenile one. And I'll show you some of the similarities with some of the fish that I picked up. Here's 3 pictures. Now this is a lighter skin with dark spots. So that is a juvenile brown, but it has white leading edges and it actually has pink dots, and you can't see it very well here, but they're little blue rings, but that is a juvenile brown. This is obviously a brook trout, but what is this? This is a steel blue fish. It is a brook trout, but it's a very different looking brook trout than a normal brook trout. And I think that this might be because tiger trout are not fertile. This might be a hybrid of brown trout and brook trout. This might be a variation of a tiger, that offspring. I want to talk with you about fish eyes and the way to see things. Air to water are two different mediums. If you look at a pencil from the air, it gets bent. If you're going to bow shoot a fish, you have to compensate and move because the fish in the water are not really. Same with the trout looking up. They have a conical zone that's limited by the bank. Everything is bent to the side to a trout. So if you have a tall person and a short person, first off, there's a ripple effect for fish, but it's also reacted to side. So a fish cannot see the shorter person. It can still see the taller person. So when I'm approaching brook trout, I start getting shorter and shorter. And I have a confidence that when I just take a knee on the bank, literally trout cannot see me. So that is a stealthy way I go about approaching brook trout, is just getting shorter. This is a typical creek for brookie fishing. It's really clear. It happens to be stained a little bit like I see. This is how I will approach it. I'll scoot up to it and I'll assess the layout, deciding where I'm going to put my fly first, deciding where trout must be holding out. Sometimes I will put my phone over the side and under the water and then lift my phone up just to see if there were fish there. So Lost Creek Wilderness, which I just showed you here, is this tributary. It has a south fork and a north fork. And in my chapters, I explain both of those forks are confluence down. And I'm going to jump over now and start talking about some of these other northern tributaries. Oh, here's more of when I show maps in my book of an area, I'll show the public access and I'll show in blue the river layout. And it's pretty well marked, these maps, so you have an idea, your orientation, where you are with the roads and the towns and accesses. Also give us, right after the map, directions, where I'll tell you very specifically from which highway, how many miles, even mile markers of where to go. And I'll show you an image of what it looks like. This is Lost Creek, so that you have an idea if it's something that appeals to you or maybe not. I'm going to jump out to these northern tributaries of Jefferson. I'm going to talk about Jefferson Creek. Reservoirs that are fishable and public in South Park. Everybody knows 11 Mile Spinney, maybe Ontario. Maybe you didn't know there's a fishable reservoir in Fairplay. We also have Tarryall, but you don't usually remember Jefferson or Montgomery Lake. And these are high alpine creek-fed lakes with very steep mountains that when this is calm and placid, it's just gorgeous because it reflects the mountains up. The lake itself has trout, and Mackinac Lake trout in it, but it's Jefferson Lake that I like to fish. And being in that slot that's actually between 11 and 10,000 feet, there are a lot of brown trout here. Juvenile browns and brookies do overlap. And it's the creek that flows out of Jefferson Lake that I've included in. You can, I hope it appeals to you, this kind of fishing there. Beaver ponds, there will be moose. If you go to Jefferson Lake and slow down and drive through, you will see moose. There's a healthy population of moose there. My mother thought this moose was laying down. I said, no, he's standing in the water. Another northern tributary is Michigan Creek. Here's Jefferson Creek. All of these creeks are separated. Their little drainages are separated by ridges. And so the next drainage over is Michigan Creek. And a lot of these creeks, which have labels like Michigan Creek, have a whole bunch of bifurcated other little creeks that pour into them. And all of those other little fingerling creeks are also fishable. So Michigan Creek is a lovely place to fish itself. There is a state wildlife down here just off of 285. This is what the state wildlife areas look like. They have signs, benches. They're pretty well overgrown with willows, but you can get inside there. This is what it would look like how you would fish an area that's overgrown with willows. You get in the water and you get up close, wherever there's a dam or a drop, there's a big pool here. And that's where you're going to catch some, usually big brown trout that are feeding like predators on the brookies. So I would fish this hole and then I would stand in that hole and cast upstream. So when there's a lot of willows, you're going to want short, fat leaders. Some people who think they're going to go fishing for brookies think that they need 7X or 6X and a real long leader. These aren't spring creeks or like Henry's Fork. These are really narrow passages. So you want short, fat leaders. The fish are not leader shy, and you're going to be getting hung up a lot on stuff you just don't see, like some dry sticks. And whenever you're hung up, you want to win. You want to pull, break off, and keep fishing with that fly. I usually just one fly, not any droppers when I'm fishing. So in the Michigan Creek area, Michigan Creek itself is fishable all the way up, but some of my favorite creeks are these little ones. I like to grouse hunt. And my book includes a rating if it's good for elk hunting, grouse hunting, dispersed camping, dogs, bicycle riding. What I'll do is I'll usually go grouse hunting and follow a creek up, and I'll keep a Tenkara rod in my vest, my orange vest. And if I see a pool that looks good to me, I'll take off my orange vest and pull out my Tenkara rod and just fish for a little while, Tenkara, these little pools, and catch brookies. And then I'll go back to grouse hunting, which really throws the grouse off. They don't know what I'm doing. Is she fishing or is she hunting? And I get a lot of both. This is what Johnson Creek, which is a headwater to Michigan Creek, looks like. This is a Tenkara rod. I'm wrangling this little fish here, thinking it's a brookie, but actually when I pulled it up into my hand, I like to do an identification because I'm curious. It wasn't a brookie after all. It was a juvenile brown. It has light skin with dark spots, not dark skin with light spots. So they're just because it's a little fish doesn't mean it's a brookie. And just because it's a big fish doesn't mean it's not a brookie. This is one of my favorite kabari flies. Kabaris have soft hackle. That's a Japanese fly, uses a lot of soft hackle. You tie them pointing forward. And the method for wet fly fishing is pulsing under the water. It's very effective. When I Tenkara fish, when I first began, I wasn't sure if it was the method or if it was the fly. So I began Tenkara fishing with traditional flies, and I also began using wet flies with my traditional rod. Hands down, it's the wet fly. I'm going back to use a lot more wet flies when I'm traditional fishing. And I would recommend that you try some wet flies as well. Catch fish closer to you, hit pocket waters. Just keep the wet flies in there with the soft hackle. Doesn't have to be a Japanese fly. There are a lot of pupa patterns, a lot of soft hackle on them. I'm going to bounce around now to the North Fork of the Tarryall River. A lot of us know the Tarryall River because we know Tarryall Reservoir. In my previous book, Lesser Known Fly Fishing Venues, I pointed out 10 places on Tarryall Creek that are public access. But if you go up into the high country in U.S. Forest Service, there are different forks of the Tarryall River. There's Tarryall Creek and the North Fork of Tarryall. Some of these creeks are completely land bound by private owners, such as Tarryall Creek, but there's a portion of Tarryall Creek that's in my book that's public access. So I don't include creeks that are bound by private owners. And in the back of my book, you can look up a creek that I didn't include, like Trout Creek. And I'm going to explain why I didn't include them in the book. Either they're bound by private property, or the fishing is awful, or some other reason. Like this book is about Subarus, meaning these are places you can just drive in a normal sedan and park and fish. No four-wheel necessary and no hiking. So some of the other creeks I included were on really bad roads, so I didn't put them in this book. I'm going to show you what Klein Ranch State Wildlife Area looks like. It's the northern part of Tarryall Creek, just below U.S. Forest Service. It's a very amazing place to fish here. It's an overlap between brown trout, brookies. There are cutthroats in here as well. This is high water. I was fishing it with a friend with Tenkara. We were just dropping flies in the shallows where the deep water shallows out, and trout would come out of the deep water and hit our flies up in the shallows. So I learned how to fish high water by just letting my fly shallow out. In these places, I would let it shallow out and fish would come up and in those shallow areas. Here we are Tenkara fishing, letting our flies go in the deep water and just shallow out. Some of these state wildlife areas, besides being astronomically beautiful, also have toilets there. And so I always point out in my books, if there's designated parking, toilets, picnic tables, things like that, because you might be taking other people with you that have never seen a high alpine place, and that'd be a good place to take them where you can have a picnic together. I'm going to jump down to the Middle Fork. This body of water from its high alpine glacial basins up 13,000 feet and the tarns all the way down into the South Platte. The Middle Fork is one of my favorite tributaries to fish. There are a lot of creeks and springs that feed the Middle Fork, and its character changes from up by Montgomery Reservoir. Here's your pass. If you go through Alma and you're going to go over Hoosier Pass, there's a little turnoff to the left before you start up Hoosier Pass, and that dirt road follows the Middle Fork all the way to Montgomery Reservoir. That's all public access. You can also fish Montgomery Reservoir, and you can park with toilets at the far end of where the inlet is to Montgomery Reservoir, and you can fish the inlet of the Middle Fork. And there's a high alpine lake up there. It's quite a precarious hike, and it's really hot. No trees. It's kind of like walking on the moon. Didn't include that high alpine lake in this book, but if you're with people who want to hike, there's a very nice lake up above Montgomery Reservoir that is stocked. This is what this Middle Fork looks like in the vicinity of Alma. It's full of little beaver ponds. This is my 90-year-old mother. She's a fish murderer. She's not happy if she doesn't get a platter full of fish. When I take her fishing, I have to carry her chair. You saw it has an awning. She has a poodle on a retractable leash. The poodle needs a pillow. She has a little cooler with margaritas, her fishing rod, and her tackle box. And then she'll murder a fish. This particular fish, when I was catching it for her, I'm going to put it in the cooler. When I handled it, it made a noise. It like croaked. I have a theory that when you frighten fish, they croak and it puts the other fish down. And so when you catch fish, I think that they croak under the water, and that fish that are not near you will be down when I think they hear that croak. But anyway, when that fish croaks, and they don't have vocal cords, they're expelling air. And I really think it's a communication thing, but I couldn't kill it. So I put it back in the water. And later my mom asked me where this fish was, and I told her, "You didn't catch a fish." That's torturing a 90-year-old woman. We're going to jump down to a couple more tributaries of the Middle Fork. My favorite, I sent someone there today, the Mosquito Creek, which is before you get to Alma, you can turn off to go to Mosquito Pass and start fishing there in March. The pass itself can be impassable, and even with four-wheel drive, be very hairy, but there are some good tarns. Tarn is where the glacier sat and scooped out a hole, and it's fed by melt. It's not a lake. There's not a creek that flows in or flows out. And the tarns are stocked by the CPW by helicopter. So if you do get up to those high tarns, you can fish those areas, but it's not in this book because it's not Subaru-able. But the creek, this is a magical place for me. This is Mosquito Creek. And this is where my first place that I discovered, I would go here every day after work because during COVID, I was closing at 12 o'clock. I'd pick up my dogs and go here, and I would just fish up this creek for like a mile or two and then go back to my car, and it completely just turned my attitude around. So this is, brook trout are really hardy fellows. I mean, you literally just like fling them in the water and they'll be all right. I fish for brook trout with anything that has a prominent post on it and really short fat leaders. That was a purple haze. It's one of my favorite flies, but I found that anything that has a prominent post could be an out of season fly, like a PMD or an ant or a hopper. If it has a prominent white post, brookies will take it. They don't care. Mosquito Creek further down. I'm just showing this to you because I know this water would really appeal to you. I knew exactly where I could fish. I was going to fish flat water and let it shallow out under that bridge. I was Tenkara fishing, and I did catch a fish, but because I'm fishing with one hand and filming with my phone, I didn't catch the hit. I picked up a rainbow here. We're going to go to Buckskin Gulch. Buckskin Gulch is, you turn in Alma and you're going to go up, up, up. And the reason that I put this in the book is a couple reasons. On the way there, you can see a historic mining mill that's the U.S. Forest Service is going to restore and have kiosks and talk about the mining there. The Sweet Home Mine is an active mine. The type specimen for the world's largest rhodochrosite specimen comes from the Sweet Home Mine. There are bristlecone pines here. You can turn and go look at a bristlecone pine forest. If you're not familiar with bristlecone pines, they are the oldest living organism on the planet. They are over 2,000 years old. And the Buckskin Creek is fishable. It leads up to Lake Emma, which has very large brook trout in it. Back to the bristlecone pine, bristlecone pine, they measure them. These events happened all the way up to, the 1890s. And I found this one that was starting with discovering the Great Plains, using emoticons and cave art, lines domesticated, yes, politicians failing integrity tests. That was a map there. These are what bristlecone pines look like. Now, when you're up here, you're at tree line. That's a Rocky Mountain bluebird blue. The air is very thin. You can see, and I have multiple times seen falling stars in the afternoon. When you're up with bristlecone pines, you're humbled by where you are in nature there, and you realize how timeless it is there. The time is measured in geologic time. These mountains were uplifted. These trees have been there 2,000 years, and you're part of it, and you're going to go there and fish. This is what Buckskin Creek looks like. Don't you want to walk down to that and start fishing? This is Kite Lake. It's at the top of Buckskin Creek. Just being there is so sublime, but this is why you would want to go to Kite Lake. You can get there in a Subaru. There are 0 brookies here, but there are these beautiful cutthroats. So I put it in my book because of bristlecone pines and the cutthroat, and I say there are no brookies here. But the road at the top gets kind of gnarly, but I made my Subaru. I just went slowly and I kind of straddled this one big deep rut, and it scraped my rear end a little. But when I got up there and parked, there are picnic tables, kiosks, there are trailheads to hike to 4 14ers. There's a very nice bathroom, and there was another Subaru up there. I was using a bushy Royal Wulff to catch that cutthroat. And when I caught that cutthroat and I was sitting on the bank recording it with my phone, my rod tip and my fly were under the water, and my rod started taking off, and a trout grabbed my fly under the water and was taking off with it. There are a lot of cutthroats in there. Moving over to another drainage, just popping over. Fair Play is right here. If you're ever trapped alive in Fair Play and you're going to meet somebody, or maybe you're with really boring people, you can turn on 4th Street and you can drive up to this trailhead, the Beaver Creek Trailhead, and you can access some wilderness on Beaver Creek. It's one of my favorite places to go. It's virtually just right outside town. I'll approach a river and have a seat, like I said, decide where my first cast, second cast, third cast is going to be. I want to fish on my first cast. I'm very disappointed if I don't get a fish in my first cast, because I study these waters and I think about what these fish are doing. First cast, sitting there, of course, I pull out a little brookie, and I have to apologize. My cinematography is, well, it's special, and maybe my when I told you that brook trout are really tough. I mean, there's some fish that I'm really delicate with. Like if I have landed a native cutthroat trout, I handle it like Joseph and Moses just handed me a trout. But if it's a brook trout, they're pretty hardy fish. I'll just take a look at it, take the hook out of its mouth and send it on its way. Right around the corner, second cast, much bigger fish. I literally just stood up right there after I caught the first fish and cast upstream. And I knew there'd be a nice fish on the overhang. And this is the fish, and it was that trout that was just kind of weird looking to me. And it's probably just a brook trout, but it might be something else. Now here, hold with me for my stellar cinematography, because I'm gonna go underwater and I'm gonna show you, hang in there, hang in there. I'm gonna show you something really incredible on this fish. Wait, wait. Oh, come on, don't leave. Almost. There, look at that blue. And also when you release a fish, they're stunned. They are waiting for their air bladder to I think the word is I want to say equilibrate. When they're in the water, they don't have a firm skeleton. The water is isostatically pushing on all sides. And that's what sustains them. When you take them out of the water, you're kind of crushing and deforming them. If you've ever been in a car accident and had a seatbelt pull you back, you might know what I'm talking about. But it's the air bladder. And so when you catch a trout, especially a great big trout, the larger they are, the more fragile they are for being held in the air. You need to hold them in the water and get to cold water and not push them back and forth. Just keep them upright. Sometimes I'll put them in the grass, in the water, and just hold them upright until their air bladder has equilibrates so that they know what is up or down. If you release them too soon, they just start to tumble and twist in the water because their air bladder hasn't adjusted. This is a fish that I think might be a cross with a brown trout because it's just not very brook trout looking to me. So I have 17 venues in this book, and they all have a 5-star rating. They all have maps to show you where the boundaries of the access are. Other things in the region, like the Bristlecone Pine area, if there's other cool things to see in the area, I'll put that in the maps and tell you about it as well. I'll give you directions detailed with mileage, mile markers, and a picture so that you know if you're there that this must be the place she's talking about. And a 5-star rating, and the 5-star rating is based on different factors. Some of them are, it's just astronomically great fishing. Some of them, the fishing may not be that great, but the beauty is so important. I think you should go there. I think you should go in your Subaru and look at this place because you don't need 4-wheel drive and you don't need to hike to get there. Some of the classifications follow this. The fishing quality, if it's super easy, I'll put that there. Some of them are not super easy. Some of them have really bad washboards, rocky and bumpy. If somebody's got a really nice car, maybe they don't want to go. Maybe they don't like being on washboards. This will give you a clue. Sometimes you're with people who don't want to fish. Maybe there's hiking or biking, or you're going with somebody who's 90 years old and she needs to go where there's toilets. So I put those options in here with each chapter. And this is what a typical access looks like. I'm not driving a Subaru here. After I wrote this book, my husband bought me a 94 Toyota 4Runner, 4-wheel drive, because I beat up my Subaru so much. And he never buy a used car from me because here's my fishing crew. They go with me everywhere. And I want to point out one thing in this book. I did put one venue that is a terrible 4-wheel drive road and a big hike. The reason I did that is because I thought if once in your life you might want to go with other people and try a 4-wheel drive and a hike, I think this is doable. It's not doable. The first time I went, I didn't make it. And the 4-wheel drive was really harrowing. I couldn't make it the hike at the top because I wasn't prepared, but I went back a second time and I made it. And you see, this hike has a lot of trees and springs and water. So some of these hikes are out in the open. I said, like walking on the moon, there's no shade. I really need shade. I can't take the direct sunlight. It just kills me. But I put one venue in here, and this is why. This is 12 Mile Lake. This is what you see when you get up there. There's actually this is not a beaver pond. This is a natural lake. There are beaver ponds a little higher up and a little higher down if you want to continue hiking. And this is why you would want to go there. That's a trout. And so I put that one 4-wheel drive big hike place in there because some of you do 4-wheel drive. And I put in detail in there what the 4-wheel drive is about. You really need, it's technical. You need to know how to put your wheels where they need to be. And there are some muffler ticklers. So you're going to be rock climbing to get up there. And that's just the last quarter mile. You could use 4-wheel drive to get there. And I put this in the book. You could actually just park and walk up the gnarly part of the 4-wheel drive. And then there's a 2-mile hike above that to get to this creek. And so that's my book, Subaru-able Brookie Venues of South Park. I hope to inspire you to try some high alpine lakes and creeks, take water with you. And if you have friends with you who haven't seen high mountain country, take them on a drive and you take your rod. If you can help get temperatures, our chapter of Pikes Peak chapter of Trout Unlimited, of which I'm the vice president of education, we've set up a baseline database to start collecting water temperatures on the Front Range. The purpose is that shall there be climate studies in depth in the future, if we start collecting data now, other people can use our information that we've collected from anywhere on the Front Range as a baseline to show how things are maybe changing over time. And I have 3 books out. My first one was Lesser Known Fly Fishing Venues in South Park. That is all in South Park Basin. It's about 9,000 feet, and it's all these talking about where to park along these major tributaries in South Park Basin. Then I wrote Joe Schmo Can Catch a Big Fish. Those are fishing methodologies, things that happen under the water. What happens when you move your split shot? How do the flies behave? How do trout see flies that are floating at them in the water and in the current? What happens when you move your strike indicator, and different ways of tying tags, different ways of rigging, and what's happening with pupa under the water, the different stages of pupa. They live in the rocks. They have to pass through the water column to get to the top to emerge. There's a lot going on in the life of a pupa. Trout can only eat aquatic insects when they're in the water. So there's a chapter in there about the pupa stages and what the pupa are doing. I worked with Brian Heinwald, an entomologist at Colorado Mountain College, to write that chapter. So that's Joe Schmo Can Catch a Big Fish. And my latest, Subaru-able Brookie Venues. I've been thinking about writing, oh, by the way, you can get all of those books online and through my website, or you can just message me through Facebook and we'll send them to you. Or you can come in my shop and I'll sign them for you. But I'm working on another book called, it's about fly fishing the 7 reservoirs in South Park. And I've got the bathymetry data, which is the 3-dimensional model of the bowl of these 7 reservoirs, so that I can explain in detail where the trout should be sitting in these reservoirs. I don't know when I will get that done. I'm really behind on that because I've been fishing a lot this summer. I put my fly shop up for sale. I've been here 8 years and I planned this. I had a 10-year plan. In my 8th year, I was going to put it up for sale and take 2 years to sell it. So this is the 8th year. My shop is on the market and I expect to be around in my shop for 2 more years and then I'll retire. So maybe that'll be my last fishing book for this venue for a while, or the 7 reservoirs in South Park. And after that, I think I'll branch out. One of the ones I'm thinking of working on is hot springs, bars, and fly fishing in Idaho, things like that. So with that, thank you very much for having me. That's the conclusion of my talk, and I'm very, very grateful.
Thanks a bunch, Michelle. I got to say though, anyone that's got Phil Awani as a business ethics advisor is in serious trouble. So I say
He's
that.
in my, he's in on the cover of Joe the Schmo Can Catch Big Fish.
Does anybody have any questions for Michelle?
Just make sure you use a no mercy midge.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you're going to be fishing subsurface, you need a no mercy midge. And I think that that works anywhere. Phil designed it specifically for 11 Mile Canyon. But the no mercy midge, if you're not familiar with it, it's an emerging winter midge pattern, a mayfly midge. And it looks a lot like Charlie Craven's mole fly. Charlie ties his mole fly with kind of earth tone colors and a pretty long, soft hackle in the front. Phil makes his soft hackle of his no mercy midge really short and uses brilliant white, I think it's a synthetic, and black thread for a head. And what I'm learning is that contrast really picks trout up when there's a lot of naturals in the water. Like if I'm fishing with mini leeches, Landon Mayer's mini leeches, instead of putting 2 leeches on, a brown and a black, I'll put a white and a green, or a white and a brown, or a white and a black. And going back to the no mercy midge, it's white and black. And I think that that contrast helps trout pick that pattern up, your fly, when there are a lot of naturals in the water.
Yeah, Phil's no mercy midge is camel thread, and then he's got, you know, black thread for the head, and then it's a white CDC.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a must-have fly in your, it's not hard to tie either. Phil
Yeah.
will be happy to see you. I don't know if he has a YouTube, but he sent me the
Yes,
recipe and
yeah.
we've taught ourselves to tie it.
Yeah, and he'll yell at you if you like color your camel thread black for the head and say it's not the right size.
You know what I do sometime? I really believe in that contrast so much that if I've got a bunch of hare's ears, I will just throw some pink wrap behind the head. I'll just put a band of contrast on a fly right there where I'm fishing in my truck or something. If I want to try to entice this trout to hit it, if I'm having some problem where I'm used to normally catching a lot of fish, I'll enhance the pattern a little bit before I'll change a fly because I'm innately lazy.
Yeah. So Michelle, Steve, and I got out to Jefferson on Sunday.
Are you going to Jefferson on Sunday?
No, we did.
Oh, what do you
On
think?
Sunday. So yeah, it's a pretty cool little area. We only found some fish. There was like that first pond that had some fish in it. And then at the plate, they had the bathroom, the first pond with the bathroom, and then where the culvert was, between where the road goes on, the creek goes under the road.
Yeah.
A lot of little guys hitting.
Did you fish any of the beaver pond?
Yeah, we went down to the beaver ponds lower, but they were, you know, the water was pretty still. There was bubbles, but they were gas bubbles. And you could really see down into it. Steve caught a couple a little higher up. I think it was just warm.
Maybe you should hire one of my guides.
Yeah, well, she wasn't available because she went on a horseback ride and fell off her horse.
Talking about, who is that? Did Mary
Mary.
fall off her horse?
She did.
I did not know she fell off her horse.
Yeah, her horse, another horse spooked her horse and it knocked her off.
I'm gonna have to talk. She's having a rough time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she clued us in on the spots, but she couldn't come with us.
Thanks for the heads up. We're both horsewomen. I can't tell you how much I admire this woman and so grateful she came into my life at the time she has. But
Me too.
Mary Manka is a highly accomplished, very versatile, competent woman, fly fishing horsewoman. And she's a retired police officer from Boulder. She's seen a lot of life.
Mm-hmm. And she's like one of my best fishing buddies.
There you go.
Michelle, we've got a question coming in from the chat. First off,
Okay.
great presentation. And the question
Thank
is
you.
Kite Lake a hike-in or road access? And then recommended technique, terrestrials, nymph, etc.
Kite Lake is a drive your Subaru right to the top and park. The inlet is where all is more deep than where you park. And the deep water holds cutthroats, and you don't need anything sophisticated there, just a hopper, a royal wolf, an ant, anything on the surface.
Great. Thanks, Michele.
You're welcome.
Michele,
Well-
the roads going to a lot of these locations, they're snow-free in May, or do you have to wait till June?
Definitely snow-free in May. I fished March 10th on the going up Weston Pass. I was fishing Rich Creek, which has a trailhead, and there was snow and ice pulling back in the shady areas. March 10th, I was catching beautiful brookies. I posted it on my Facebook page for Tumbling Trout.
Michele, there's another question coming in from the chat asking about the flows in these streams that you're mentioning. How are the flows?
The flows right now are still holding up. We do have snowpack in those areas. Towards August, they'll start to get really low, but some of them are spring fed, and they will always be fishable, especially the ones that are tailwaters, such as the tailwater below Montgomery Reservoir. Yeah, and below Fairplay, the Middle Fork below Fairplay.
Okay, thank you.
It was a lot of fun for me. I want to go. I want to go right now.
It does sound like a lot of fun. So
Yeah, it's
I take it you don't see a whole lot of people back there then?
no, I don't. It's zero. And I fish alone, and I usually always have my dogs, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just me. I don't like fishing with other people. And if there is anybody around, I will go continue driving to find some place where there's not a car and not another person. I see some incredible things up there. There are places where there will be people like maybe at the trailheads above Montgomery Reservoir and the trailheads at Beaver Creek. No one will be fishing. The same, especially at Lost Creek Wilderness, can get really stacked up with cars. Nobody's fishing. Everybody's hiking.
Interesting.
How's the biting bugs in those areas, Michele?
They can be miserable, but unlike some places that I've lived, our mosquitoes do respect bug repellent. I usually put it on my hat and my buff and my collar, and I'll put a bug repellent on my clothes and around my ears, and that's good enough. The worst are the deer flies. Sometimes, in the summer, I usually just fish long pants and water sandals. I don't wear waders. And I wear the long pants because of stickery bushes and because of the biting deer flies. Those deer flies have no respect for the repellent. They're really torturous.
Looks like Cindy concurs. She says the black flies were at Jefferson Creek.
They're horrible.
Yeah. Any other questions for Michele from the group?
Michele, do you air down when you drive up in these roads that are washboards? I drove back.
No,
to
I
Lost Creek.
don't.
Okay.
No, I don't. It's not that important. It's not climbing terrain like that. It's just regular tires and car.
I drove to Lost Creek and about rattled my teeth out of my head.
You know, the first part of Lost Creek is, I tell people it's 14 miles of the worst road you'll drive on. Then you go over that pass and it comes down for whatever reason. Maybe it's rock type, I don't know. But then it's not so bad. You can also get to there from Tarryall Reservoir driving through the US forest. But some of those roads, like up on Rampart Range, there's so many bifurcated roads leading off. I get lost and I really just don't know where I am. But no, the only place that that was harrowing is the 4-wheel drive road that goes up to 12 Mile Creek. And that's a road, I mean, once you're started, you're committed. You're not gonna turn around. You could be crying. Maybe you'll need a beer, but you're not gonna be turning around once you get started on that road. So, you know, I take my friends and they're screaming and they've got their hands on the roof. I'm like laughing. You're like, let me out, let me out. You can't get out. There's nowhere you can get out here.
Thank you.
Michelle.
Yep.
Hi. Which town near South Park has the best lodging opportunities and restaurants?
Boy, that's a tough one. Fairplay has more lodging and restaurants than anywhere else. There are just, Lake George is starting to get more lodging. We don't have like a motel, but we have little cabins, some are higher end than others, and Airbnbs. There's some glamping resorts. There aren't any restaurants. We just started to restaurant open in Lake George, and they have very spotty hours that they're open. So I don't know why. It's actually traced back to the Hayman fire. The Hayman fire closed this district down. People have PTSD, and there's no reason that Lake George shouldn't be booming and growing like Jackson Hole. There's 11 Mile Canyon here, Wildcat Canyon there. I mean, this is on a major highway that leads from Colorado Springs, goes up over to Breckenridge. So I don't understand why there aren't more businesses getting started here.
Is there
As for
anything
lodging
in,
and food,
is there anything in
maybe
Florence?
Breckenridge.
Does Florence have anything?
Florissant has 0 lodging. They have a bar. If you wanted to stay someplace is nice, you might go over to Breckenridge. I do have a page in my website called Lodging, and it has the phone numbers and the prices of every place in the district here, where you can get the name of it and their phone number and their price and call them to see if they have availability. On my webpage, it's called Lodging.
Okay, what is your webpage?
TumblingTrout.com.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm pleased to meet you and chat with you.
I have your first book.
Lesser known fly fishing venues.
Yes.
Have you gone fishing in some of those places?
Unfortunately not, due to some health reasons and other factors, but I hope to.
Well, yeah, I hope you can get out there. A lot of those places you can just park next to the river.
I'd like to stop by your fly shop sometime.
Please do. I'm usually there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Okay. Are you open past noon?
Yeah, we're open 7 to 3 every day now. We have to close at 3 because everybody has to go fishing. I'm not kidding.
That's what every company should do.
Yeah. During hunting season, you know, we have turkey and grouse and doves out here and ducks and geese in South Park. So, and I don't hunt big game, but the other guys are hunting big game. It's really tough to keep the shop staffed during hunting season.
Has the heat affected any of your streams?
The heat will be affecting the streams. Every year, the water drops. It's not coming up again down in South Park. So definitely the South Fork, the Middle Fork, these waters get too warm. The trout are stressed. And if they close off the spillways, as sometimes 11 Mile has closed the spillway and just made it a trickle out of the canyon, it's very stressful, and we don't guide those waters. And we're not judging people. It's your ethical call, just like walking through reds. It's your call how you're going to be fishing, but we don't guide when the water is in the 60s. And we take people up to the high elevation places. We take them to reservoirs. We go float fishing. We put them in kick boats or pontoon boats, or we take them to high alpine venues. We have permits on some of these high alpine lakes and creeks. And we won't guide in the basin when the temperatures of the water are like that. I found that people like to see something different. They want to see some Rocky Mountain, Colorado anyway. If they have to do the Dream Stream, we'll take them to the Dream Stream for half a day, and then we'll take them up in the high country and put a little rod in their hand and catch brookies and show them someplace with wildflowers and those big, beautiful glacial basins. That's what people really want. They want to see something like that.
By the way, for anyone that might be interested, I just returned from Steamboat Springs a couple hours ago, and the Yampa River has been closed down.
Because it's too high?
Too low, water temperature is 74.
Oh my God.
And I heard the Colorado closed last Friday. I don't have any other details than that, but I stopped by the Steamboat Fly Fisher, and that was the news they gave me, that the Colorado River closed down last Friday. I guess voluntarily. Like I say, I don't want to talk about things I don't know much about.
I'm definitely going to look into that.
But the Yampa, it was deadly hot up there. It was in the late or upper 80s, lower 90s for the last 4 days. I did not bother to break out my fishing rod since I had family duties, and it was really, really hot. But
sometimes you just gotta, you just have to take it all off and get in the water.
Well, that is done by the tube hatch on Fridays and the weekends, and there are plenty of tubers coming down the river for that.
If I'm alone or nobody's around, it's just me and my dogs, and it's hot like that, I'll strip down. We're all going to get in the water. You could do it too. You'd be young and frisky again. I know you could do it.
I'll take young.
It's
What else we got, Scott?
inspiration.
Nothing else. If anybody else has any questions, otherwise, I'd like to thank Michele for joining us tonight. It was a wonderful presentation. It's got me wondering or thinking about hitting some of these locations real soon.
Thank you all. And I just hope that you still find some inspiration in your life, and that you can find some beauty and just love where you are. Get up there, go surround yourself by beauty.
Great words, great words. Well, thank you, Michele, and everybody else. And with that, I think we'll adjourn tonight's meeting.